Now on record. So we are in story 231 in our merged gospel, 231. And if you remember the circumstances that brought us to where we are. All right, so what are we dealing with? Once again, Jesus has entered into Jerusalem. All right, and now he is being bombarded and confronted by the religious leaders. And are the religious leaders happy about what Jesus is doing?
No.
Not at all. They're very upset. And the purpose, the reason for why they're upset is because Jesus is bringing forth to them truth. And he's bringing forth to them an understanding of what the scriptures truly mean. One of the problems that the religious leaders had during Jesus' day was that they interpreted the laws of Moses to fit what? Their own precepts, their own thinking. So they would take the word, and instead of trying to understand what God was saying, they would take the laws of Moses and mold it and bend it in a manner that it would satisfy what they wanted. Aren't we glad people don't do that today? It kind of happens that spirit is still here, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, so I think it's important for us to recognize that when Jesus looked and saw what these religious leaders did, he was not very happy. And so what we're going to see now, as time and time, they came to him with the question, should we pay taxes? And they thought they trapped Jesus. Then the Sadducees came with the story about the woman that married the 7 brothers, and they all died, and they tried to trap Jesus, and Jesus answered that question. So now the story we're going to look at now is Jesus finally going up to these religious leaders, and he's going to take the covers off them. He goes, let me tell you who you really are. Imagine that. Jesus coming to you and telling you who you really are. Now we know God loves us, doesn't he?
Amen.
And he cares for us, and he gave his life for us. But can you imagine within yourself how bad you really can be? That ain't fun to think about, is it? But see, the enemy knows how bad we can be. And he tries to manipulate that. The Spirit of God tries to show us how good we can be, and how us following the Word of God and the light that Jesus gives can improve our circumstances. Well, when you decide that you don't want the light, you then live where?
In the dark.
In darkness. And that's what these religious leaders of Jesus' day did. They rejected the light and decided to do what? Live in darkness. And that's what we're going to see here. So let's go through the reading, and then we're going to go back and we'll go through the review. So this is story 231. Woe to the Scribes and Pharisees. Let's take a listen here. I hope this is loud enough.
Story 231. Woes to the Scribes and Pharisees. Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, and the great crowd enjoyed listening to him. And while all the people were listening, in his teaching he said to the disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. Therefore, all that they tell you, do and observe, but do not do according to their deeds, for they say things and do not do them. But they tie up heavy loads and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are unwilling to move them with so much as a finger. But beware of the scribes, who like to walk around in long robes. They do all their deeds to be noticed by men, for they broaden their phylacteries and lengthen the tassels of their garments. And they love chief seats in the synagogues and the place of honor at banquets. And they love respectful greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. And you should not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Christ, and all of you are brothers. And you may not call anyone your father on the earth, for one is your Father, who is in heaven. Nor may you be called leader, for one is your leader, the Christ, and the greater of you will be your servant. And whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut up the kingdom of heaven before men. For you do not go in, nor do you permit those going in to enter. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you are those who devour widows' houses, and for appearance's sake offer long prayers. These will receive greater condemnation. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you go around the sea and the dry land to make one proselyte, and whenever it happens, you make him a son of Gehenna, twice as much as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever might swear by the sanctuary, it is nothing, but whoever might swear by the gold of the sanctuary is a debtor. Fools and blind ones, for which is greater, the gold or the sanctuary that is sanctifying the gold? And whoever might swear by the altar, it is nothing, but whoever might swear by the gift that is on it is a debtor. Fools and blind ones, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that is sanctifying the gift? He therefore who swears by the altar swears by it, and by all things on it. And he who swears by the sanctuary swears by it, and by him who is dwelling in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God, and by him who is sitting on it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you give a tithe of the mint and the dill and the cumin, and neglect the weightier things of the law, the judgment and the kindness and the faith. It is necessary to do these, and not to neglect those others. Blind guides, who are straining out the gnat and are swallowing the camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you may clean the outside of the cup and the plate, and within they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first cleanse the inside of the cup and the plate, and the outside of them might also become clean. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly indeed appear beautiful, and within are full of dead men's bones, and of all uncleanliness. So also indeed, outwardly you appear to men as righteous, and within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets, and adorn the tombs of the righteous. And you say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. So that you testify to yourselves that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. And you fill up the measure of your fathers. Serpents, brood of vipers, how will you escape from the judgment of Gehenna? Because of this, behold, I send to you prophets, and wise men, and scribes, and of them you will kill and crucify, and of them you will scourge in your synagogues, and you pursue from city to city, that on you will be all the righteous blood being poured out on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who is killing the prophets and stoning those sent to her. How often did I want to gather your children, as a hen gathers her young under the wings, and you did not want it. Behold, your house is left to you desolate. But I say to you, you will not see me from now on, until whenever you will say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.
All right. Now that's a lot, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't think I would want to have that said unto me. One of the things I think is important to keep in mind is that when you find yourself in a situation where you have exhausted the mercy of God. Now, that almost sounds like something that's hard to imagine, isn't it?
Yes.
we go back, and I'll say this, and I'll go back to another leader. Now, Jesus is talking to his religious leaders of his day. But let's go back to another leader. You remember Pharaoh, story of Moses, and how God sent Moses to Pharaoh to tell Pharaoh to what? Let my people go. And the leader, Pharaoh, said, who is this God? And Moses told him that the God that sent me said that I am has sent me. And Pharaoh kept saying, I'm not going to let him go. But then something would happen. And then what? He would change his mind. And then after he changed his mind, things would get what? All right again. And then he would harden his heart what? Once again. And this happened about 4 times. Now, the interesting thing is, and this is where that aspect of playing with God, well, I'm going to do this. You make a promise, and then you say, I'm not going to do it. Well, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it. You keep going back and forth like that. Well, eventually, what happened to Pharaoh? And I'm telling the story to show that there is a point sometimes when God's mercy will say, it's done. In the story, if you read the wording, it said Pharaoh would harden his heart. Then again, Pharaoh would harden his heart. But after about the 4th or 5th plague, it doesn't say Pharaoh would harden his heart. It said what? God hardened Pharaoh's heart. So it got to the point where God froze him into the state of mind that he kept going to. And that's the end of God's mercy for that particular situation. We could think of another time when Saul, King Saul, was told by God to go and to kill all the Amalekites. And King Saul said, well, I'm going to go do it, but I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. I'm not going to really kill the king, because the king and we can work out some stuff. He's a king. But God told him to do what? Kill all beasts. And he said, kill all the beasts, all the animals. But Saul went around and he saw some animals. He said, now, these some very healthy animals here. Let's make some good food, or some farm workers, or I can put a harness in them, and I can go work the fields with these. He said, why should I kill them? But God told him to do what? Kill him. So when the prophet Samuel came to Saul and said, Saul, why haven't you done what God said to do? And Saul said, I've done all. He said, why do I hear all of these animals crying out and speaking in their own animal language? And he said, well, I thought I would do this. And so once again, he did what he wanted to do, as opposed to what he was directly told by God to do. And then eventually God said, I will what? Reject Saul. Well, Samuel, knowing who God is, was like, well, I'm still gonna pray for Saul. And he kept praying and he kept praying. And so what did God tell Samuel? He said, Samuel, get up. Do not pray for Saul anymore. Can you imagine that? That you get to a point when people still care for you and they're praying for you. And God tells a person that's praying for you, get up. Don't pray for that person anymore. I have already rejected him. And that's what happened to King Saul. So we can see these two people, Pharaoh, King Saul, where the mercy of God stopped. But we know God's mercy is everlasting. Amen. So what is it then that can make God's mercy stop? That's the thing. That's the thing that boggles my mind. And by no means am I going to tell you that I have the answer. Because I don't. I don't know the answer. All I can tell you is that it can happen.
I always ask people, when they ask about the word says that his mercy endures forever.
Yes.
But I ask people, when is your forever over? The day that you stop breathing life, your forever is over. There's no more mercy. So, in not knowing when he's going to call you, it behooves you to take advantage of the mercy by drawing closer to him. Because when the word says there's no repentance beyond the grave. So if we walk around assuming we got all this time, we could just do what we want to do, and God decided that the man that built them bigger barns, today your house, your soul is required. You did all of this, but your soul is required.
Your soul is required.
You didn't take care of your first business.
That's right.
And now he had to go.
That's right.
So the mercy's over when you go in the grave.
That's right.
There's no more need for your mercy at the point of your being in that state.
Exactly.
The next thing after that is your being before the Lord.
So that situation of sometimes we think that, well, God will always just be okay with what I do wrong is what kind of a thinking? Highly incorrect. So now we get to our story today. And what we see here is these individuals that are, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Come on in.
Come on in.
Come on in.
How you doing, Lenny?
All right, this brother Alexis, everybody.
Hello.
How you doing?
Introductions later. Good
How
to
you
see
doing?
again.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
All right. So we're doing what's called the merged gospel. Now, for those who may not have a copy of what we have here, I do have another copy left if anyone would like it. Pass that down. But most of what we're talking about, you can find in Matthew. Good morning. You can find in Matthew 23. It's also in Luke 13 and Luke 20.
231, brother.
All right. Actually, I should say not Matthew. Mark 23 and Matthew 12. Let me correct myself. Mark 23 is where you can find most of what we're going to discuss today, if you don't have one of our pamphlets. So when we get to this story here, so we see that Jesus is dealing with the religious leaders of his day. Now, before we get into the religious leaders of Jesus' day, do we have problems with leaders of our day?
Yes.
What kind of problems do we have with leaders of our day?
The same problem.
What's the same? What kind of issues do we got?
Not practicing what they preach.
Not practice. So that's called what?
Huh?
Hypocrisy.
Hypocrisy.
So we're gonna see that word pop up here a couple of times, isn't it? All right. What about really caring for others? We're gonna see a phrase that Jesus is gonna use describing his religious leaders of his day. And he's gonna say that they devour widows' houses. All right. We're gonna get to that in a minute, but I want to do a little precursor on that. What does that mean?
Taking advantage of it.
Taking advantage. So you use your leadership position to take advantage of the people that you're supposed to be what? Leading.
Yeah.
There's an aspect that Jesus said that if you wanted to be a leader or you wanted to be considered great, you should do what?
Serve.
Be what?
A servant.
A servant. So wait a minute. If I'm a leader, shouldn't I have people serving me? That's not how the description that Jesus points out. But see, in our day, in 2018, a person that's considered a leader usually have people doing what?
Serving.
Serving them. But let's go back to the way that Jesus described it. He said if you wanted to be great, if you wanted to be a leader, you should do what?
Be servant.
Be the servant. So in other words, I should, if you want to be great in the eyes of who?
God.
You should find ways to serve.
Others.
Other people.
But now, in 2018, here in America, if you want to be great, you need to be able to find people that can serve you. So we need to make sure that we make that distinction. We're not talking about the leaders defined by our current culture. That's not the leadership we're looking for. What kind of leadership are we looking for? Leadership that is described by who? By Christ. That means that I will serve you. I'm not gathering people to find what I can get out of them. I'm trying to find people that I can find ways to put things into them.
Right.
I want to give. I have something that I feel is valuable and I want you to have it too.
Amen.
That's leadership.
Amen.
That's what Jesus did. Jesus had he is the way. He is the light. He is God come in flesh, and he knew that everything he had, we needed.
Yes.
So he came down as a suffering what? Servant. But that also makes him what? If you serve, that makes you what?
Great.
Great. So that made Jesus who? Great. Why? Because he served. And so he's doing this. He's showing the people of his day, the leadership of his day, how to serve, how to be great, how to truly lead. And the leaders of his day are upset. They are extremely just like thrown off because they want to have leadership defined the way they want it defined. And so therein is the story that we're looking at today. All right? And so now Jesus is going to finally tell them exactly what their issue is. And he doesn't cut corners. He just tells them exactly what what he sees in them. So let's take a look at this. Once again, story 231. Woe to the scribes and Pharisees. You also can find this in Mark 23. But he says, then Jesus spoke to the crowd. Now we talked about the crowd before. Who's in the crowd?
All kinds of people.
All kinds of people are in the crowd, right? And so you're going to find people that are following Jesus because they are curious about him. The same thing people do today. They're curious about who Jesus is.
Well, it's actually Matthew 23. You said Mark. It's Matthew 23.
Matthew's 20.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Just,
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Looking for the Bible. It's in Matthew.
Matthew's 23. Thank you. And so the crowd, you have what? Everybody.
Everybody. Mixed batch.
All kinds of people that follow Jesus. The people that are just interested. People that are looking to see what they can get. People that remember, I followed Jesus and I got something out of it. Remember the 4,000 and the 5,000 that got the food fed to them? And they begin to follow Jesus. But Jesus said, you're following me because your bellies were what? Filled. So there are people that are following Jesus for a lot of reasons. And that's what that crowd represents. There's a lot of people today that are interested in the things Jesus do. They're interested in the things Jesus said. They're interested in the things that Jesus stands for. But they're not interested in the salvation that Jesus offers. So they're part of the crowd. See, Jesus says, I have salvation. I have something that I can give to you that will bring you beyond this stage of life into an eternal realm. And he's guaranteed that to us. And if that's not true, then God ain't true.
That's right.
And so that must be true.
Amen.
And so therefore, it behooves us to try to what? Understand it and walk in it.
Amen.
All right? So he's talking to the crowd, so we know, and we want to get a picture. Who's there? So you got this, what? Crowd of people. Right? All kinds of people that are there for all kinds of reasons. You also have, it says the crowd and his disciples. Now you see the distinction. It didn't mix the disciples in with the what? Crowd. It said the crowd and his disciples. So the disciples are people that believe Jesus for who he said he is. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you believe that, you're part of the disciples. You're part of those that follow Jesus. If you just, well, I'm curious about what Jesus can do. I heard that if you follow Jesus, it can make you rich. I heard if you follow Jesus, it can make you healthy. I heard if you follow Jesus, it can make you powerful. Well, you're part of the what? Crowd. But if you want to follow Jesus because you believe he is God come in the flesh, you believe he is God coming to bring salvation to you, then you're part of the what? The disciples.
That's right.
Yes.
All right? So he's speaking to the crowd and the disciples, and a great crowd enjoyed listening to them. They enjoyed hearing what he had to say. All right? Jesus is not boring. That's one thing you can say about Jesus. You may agree with him or you may disagree, but he's not boring. You see Jesus pop up in everything. You can watch a TV show, all of a sudden Jesus pops up. People talk about it. Go to the movies and they're talking about things. And even if they don't say the word Jesus, they'll say something that Jesus said. They'll have phraseology. They'll have terms and stuff like that that make you think, that sounds a whole lot like who, Jesus is not boring. And the world today finds what he is and what he stands for very interesting. And they'll talk about him, be it right or be it wrong. They'll talk about the things that Jesus talked about. And it says, and while all the people were listening in his teaching, he said to his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees have seated themselves in Moses' chair. Okay, what does that mean? The scribes and the Pharisees, these are the religious leaders during Jesus' day, were sitting. What am I trying to say?
Like you're taking
Seated.
position.
They were taking position. They were sitting in Moses' seat.
Not only that, they were acting as if they were the lawgivers to the people.
Exactly. That's it. We're going to get to that point too. They're sitting in Moses' seat. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that they were sitting in the seat of authority that was granted properly by God during God's development of the Hebrew or the Israelite people. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob set forth some rules and some hierarchies of how things should be done. And Moses' seat was described as one of those. So when you sit in Moses' seat, it's almost like someone says, well, we're going to put this brother in as mayor. So now you're sitting in the seat of what? Of mayor. So now you got to do the mayoral things. If we put you in the seat in Congress, you're sitting there in the seat of Congress. And there are certain things that are what? Expected of you. Now, just because a person sits in the mayor's seat, does that make them righteous?
No.
You mean what? Congress? No. Yeah, certainly people that are in the Senate are good folk. All of them. That ain't true, is it? All right. So just like how we know today, let's go back to Jesus' time, and we got these individuals that are sitting in the government or political seat of Moses that have the same kind of issues like we see today. All kinds of corrupted folks sitting in seats of so-called leadership, but they're not leading properly. And Jesus is pointing it out. And he's not only saying that you're not leading properly, you haven't been leading properly for a long time. It's been a while since y'all had some godly leadership. So he says that they're sitting in Moses' seat. In other words, they're sitting in the place of authority. Therefore, all that they tell you, do and observe. Now, when he says all that they tell you in regards to what was written and given to who? Moses. That you do. The seat that they're sitting in is a seat that was ordained by who? By God.
By God.
All right? So we look at the Word of God that we're reading today. All right? You can have a very corrupt person read the Word of God. But the Word of God doesn't become corrupt because the person that reads it is what? Corrupt.
Right.
So if you can get somebody that's a criminal that can tell you Jesus saves. Well, what he said was true, but you don't want to do what he does. You can get somebody that's a person that assaults people. He tells you God is love and God is good and you should believe the Bible. Well, that's true. You listen to what he says, but don't do what he does. So God is real. His writings, his information that he passed down to us through Moses, through the Old Testament, that we still study today, is real. And there's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of light in there. But be careful by the means of what it's given. I'm sitting here talking to you. What I say is the proper thing. But if you see me do something that's like, oh, I don't like the way he did that, you don't disregard the what? The word.
Amen.
You say, well, what he did was incorrect, but the word he gave was what? Correct.
Amen.
So, Jesus is trying to get them. I'm getting ready to show you the truth about these religious leaders. But I want to make sure that you understand, when I get ready to tell you what these religious leaders are like, don't think that I'm talking about what was given to you by Moses. I'm not disparaging the word of God given by Moses. I'm getting ready to disparage these leaders that sit in Moses' seat. So make sure that you make a distinction between that. All right? And so then he goes on and he says the scribes and the Pharisees sit themselves in Moses' seat. Therefore, all that they tell you, do and observe, but do not according to their deeds. For they say things and do not do them. They say things and they don't what?
Do them.
Okay.
Don't practice what you preach.
So let's bring that home. All right. Oh, has anybody been guilty of that? All right. All right. I certainly have. So what does that make me?
At that time?
At that time, I have to.
Okay.
At that time.
All right.
At that time.
So that means that within my own experiences and with all of our experiences, we find that when we examine ourselves, that we can truly say, as Paul says, that woe is me, I'm a what?
Wretched man.
I'm a wretched man. What's another word for that? A sinner. All right. So everybody can identify with sinners. Listen.
Elder, there's a funny thing that came to my mind. A lot of times on jobs, when people get promoted to be supervisors, they won't let the workers do what they used to get away with.
Mm-hmm.
They're extra on them because they know how slick they were.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to let nobody else slick them.
Mm-hmm.
Extra lunch hours,
Yeah.
Sliding stuff to the side, getting some, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a similar situation. They were given it to you to do, but they were not following it at all themselves.
Exactly. Yes.
I'm not sure I'm clear of your distinction between the religious leaders and the quote worldly. You refer to the Senate and Congress. They're not religious leaders.
No.
We're talking about religious leaders. And we have that in our churches today.
Yes, we
more
do.
than we do. I mean, we need to look at that as a religious leaders today as the Pharisees and Scribes were back then.
Exactly.
Because the Congress and Senate and anybody else, they're the world. They know not what they do. They're the world.
Yes.
So I wasn't kind of clear of which, because you were kind of entwining the two.
And I am entwining the two purposely, because if you think about Jesus' day, the religious leaders were also the political leaders. So it was a little bit of both.
That's not true today, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so today we have we have religious leaders that are so-called in our organized religion that you can just turn on the news and you see all kinds of issues. But we also see political leaders that live by what we would consider the Judeo-Christian philosophy that we have in America, which is still based upon some of the beliefs that we have, from the Bible. But to your point, yes, my main direct arrow will go to our religious leaders. But because during Jesus' day, they act as both. They were both the political as well as the religious leaders of that day. I'm trying to bring it all out. But my main target, yes, because I don't feel that we're going to be able to do a whole lot about Congress and all that kind of stuff. I don't what they're doing in Russia, what they're doing in the UN and all that. But what we can make a difference in is what's going on in the house of God. That's a big. Did you have a question?
No, it wasn't a question. It was kind of like a statement. I'm focusing in on three words: the word "woe," the word "scribe," and the word "Pharisees." And looking it up in the dictionary, a scribe is usually referred to as someone who is a writer, who's very well read and very lettered, intelligent, a leader of sorts. And in looking up the word Pharisees and Sadducees and whatnot, my dictionary told me that these people are considered a sanctimonious, self-righteous, or hypocritical people. Now that's what we have ruling, this country and most other countries in the world today. Those are their attributes and characteristics. So the same characteristics that existed in the day of Moses still exist today.
Exactly.
Satan has not left us.
That's right.
I mean, and he's in the church too. And so I'm looking at it from a standpoint of God telling, the people that you have to be aware of these Pharisees and Sadducees, because they say, and they state, and they write, especially scribe, because when you think of the word scribe, you think of, like scribbling almost.
Yeah, we're going to get to that a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
No,
So,
that's
I'm
good.
just kind of trying to bring a parallel there that, that they're all a bunch of hypocrites. And,
Just Mother Barbara, there's a scripture that came to my mind just now. And that's why it's so important to get connected to the Holy Spirit. Because he said, try the spirits and see if they be of God. And if you have the Holy Spirit in you, the Bible says it's going to lead and guide you into all truth. And if you're sitting up under somebody and they ain't teaching you right, and you eat that, and you got that spirit, it's on you. It's your fault. But if somebody don't know God, they have to know God. That's why we have people that say we are of Christ. We got to take a stand for him, because there's some babe coming behind us that needs to drink that milk so they can grow thereby. So that we can identify these people. So we don't have these Jim Jones situations. We have to be able to identify who's on the Lord's side. Thank you, Elder.
And yes, we talked about Jim Jones, and we're going to talk about that scribe in a minute, but I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of times we look at Jim Jones, and that's the obvious. But the ones that I think that I want to focus on, not only the Jim Jones, but I want to also make sure that we're focusing on the wolf in what? Sheep's clothing.
But they out there.
Because that's the one that looks right. They look good. They say the right things. And Barbara pointed out the scribes. And so when you get to the scribes, they were the so-called, they were writers, but you can type them as the intellectual. Those that would go into our universities write about the things of God. They write about theological philosophies. All these books. Go to a Christian bookstore today and just look at all the books that are written. All the stuff that people have on the shelves on what they feel you should do. 7 steps to a blessing. 8 steps to being, in God's will. All these different steps. I only got 1 step, and that's God Himself. Amen. If you know Jesus, then you got all you need. Now, when it comes down to what you should do, this is sometimes where we forget. We live in other people's realities. I'm going to read your book and try to do like you. No. Can I build a personal relationship with God myself? And that's the encouragement that I have for you. You need to know God. You should be praying to God. You should be writing your own book. What are you doing with God? What are you doing daily? In your walk with the Lord, are you listening to hear? Because I guarantee you this. God is speaking to you. Every one of you. Every one of us. God speaks to all of us. Now, whether you're tuned in or not, it's up to you. It's kind of like AM, FM radio. There is AM, FM radio signals coming in this room right now. If we had a AM, FM radio, we turn it on, we would get the signals. They're coming in right now. But if you're not tuned to it, it's coming in and you're not hearing it. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with the Spirit of God, your spirit being tuned to what God is saying. Now, God can find a lot of ways to get your attention. But He speaks to you all the time if you're tuned in. But when you keep ignoring Him, then He'll find another way to come. He won't come through it like an airwave. He'll just come knock on the door and say, hey, I'm trying to get your attention. And then people still ignore. And we can go through a bunch of scenarios like that. Remember Paul. Paul, who thought he was doing the right thing. And he was going out persecuting the Christians. And he wasn't hearing God. So God finally had to come and do what? Knock him off his beast, blind him, and say, Paul, why are you what? Kicking against the pricks. So those are the things that we have to build. Those personal relationships. This is what the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious leaders of Jesus' day, and unfortunately today, refuse to do. They want to use God for their betterment and not allow God to use them. So God becomes a tool for them to get rich, for them to be popular, for them to becomes just a tool.
Which is the way that Congress and senators utilize the Word of God. They use it to get elected, and then after that it gets pushed.
Did y'all hear what she said? That's important.
Which goes back to your example of why you intertwine, them both, because comparing one another, that's how they both look to people, to have people look at them and regard them with respect.
Exactly.
It's interesting you said that, and I was thinking about what my mother-in-law said. A lot of times, I think recently, people were trying to find out which, because this is supposed to be a country that fears God. Mm-hmm. God bless America, right? And God we trust. You hear that all the time. You see it in the court, right? So people are always trying to figure out the people that they're going to elect or vote for, where they stand religiously. Mm-hmm. But I do see also a lot of times, although they're two separate entities, that once people are in office, you very rarely hear anything about them. But God purposely is not looking for us to mingle His word or His lifestyle with the lifestyle that the world lives. And like Mom said, the world is part, the Senate, the Congress, the police, all of us, there's things going on that are not of God. Mm-hmm. And He said He confines the wise, right? They're supposed to know it all. But He purposely hides from them His ways, because He's not going to let them figure out how He moves, because His move is different. Right. But they always want to know, what do they believe? Do they believe in this? Do they believe in that? Do they this and this and that? So sometimes you can't even lock them down to what they believe in.
Exactly.
Consider that this world is ruled, the entire world is ruled by governments de facto. If you know what de facto means, they are illegal governments, because the only true government should be the government of God. So if you're being ruled by evil,
What do you expect?
Yeah. We're going to continue to see the corruption. That's
Yeah.
that,
Right.
and so
But they're all in there because God put them there.
Of
No
course.
one can do it unless
That's
God
right.
puts
That's
right.
whoever's in Congress, whoever's in,
Of course.
God has put them there for a
Of course,
purpose.
he's
Amen.
got a higher purpose.
Almost like Moses, God put Pharaoh there to,
Mhm. But I think part of that purpose might be to show the people who are inclined to be godly, to see the difference between what's wrong and what's right. You can certainly, I don't think too many people today can see that what's going on in these various countries by the leaders that are ruling, that they're not doing the right thing. It's, God has a reason for everything he does. And if people can't see the difference between right and wrong, then they should just, look at these leaders, what they're doing.
right.
You're right.
Now, one thing that we're going to see here, and I think even from that aspect of Moses, look at what Moses came through to be who he was. All right, you got. Can God bring you through what we're going through, what we experience, and bring you to where He has designed you to be? That's the ultimate thing. Can you be what you're designed to be? You should be. You should be able to be what you're designed to be, and not be upset because somebody else. I look in that kitchen over there, and I see the microwave, I see the oven. There's a toaster, I would assume, in there, right? So, should the toaster that was designed to do what? Toast. Get upset with the oven because I don't get no turkeys put in me. Nobody cooks a ham in me. But was the toaster designed to handle a ham? No. The toaster was designed to do what? To toast. And so if the toaster can be happy with what it was designed to do, it will be a useful tool in the house of the masters. You will find useful, and when the toaster decides it wants to heat up to 400 and something degrees and cook your Pop-Tarts and your bread like you would cook a turkey, then what happens to the toaster? And you got to do what? You got to get rid of it. They're all using the same electricity or the same sauce. They're serving the same person, but you know what you're there for. And so when you can be brought through to be what you were designed to be, regardless as to where you come from. Did I come from a political realm? Did I come from a field? Did I come from, no matter where, can I find God's design for me and be okay with it? The problem with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and I'm harping on this, is these religious leaders refuse to be what God called them to be. They always are in competition with what? With one another. And we're going to see this with the Pharisees and the Sadducees as well. All right, let's move along here. All right. The next portion here will be Mark 23:4, and it says,
Matthew.
I'm sorry, Matthew. I keep saying Mark. Why do I keep doing that? Matthew 23:4. But they tie heavy loads and lay them upon men's shoulders. Now, who's the they? These are the religious leaders.
Yes.
So they put burdens on you. I need you to come in and I need you to do something that's what? Difficult. So, brother, I need you to come in right now, and I need $1,000 from you. God told me $1,000. Now, if I ask you for $1,000 right now, would that be easy for you to do? No. It would be a burden, wouldn't it? Mm-hmm. So what he's saying is they put burdens on people that what?
But they themselves won't do.
But they themselves won't do. They also devour
One another.
widows' houses by doing what? Asking them to what? Give and to do what is difficult. If I ask you to do something that, number one, I wouldn't do, and number two, that I know is hard. So am I now being your servant in the sense of biblically? Am I asking you to develop by me giving to you?
Being more of an oppressor.
I'm being oppressive. I'm asking you to do what? Give to me. Which is the total opposite of what Jesus would have. But he's describing these religious leaders of his day. He said, number one, they put heavy burdens on people. And I just use finance as one. There are a lot of burdens that people put on. All right. We could go through a lot of these different burdens that people put on. I won't spend the time because we do need to move along if we're ever going to get through this one. All right. And so they lay heavy burdens on them and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are unwilling, not unable, unwilling to move them with their own, with so much as their finger. So I'm going to ask you to do something that I personally would never do. So just to go back to your example, if I ask you for $1,000 and expect you to give it to me, I would never give anybody else $1,000 if they ask me. That's the mindset of those religious leaders. I'm going to ask you to do things that I would never do. So therefore they don't really have the proper even motivation for the things that they even say. Okay? Let's move along. But beware of the scribes, the writers, the theologians, those that are so-called the wise, who like to walk around in what? Long robes. Why are they walking around in long robes? Let's take a look. That they walk around in long robes. They do all these deeds to be what? To be noticed of men. What are they trying to do?
To be seen.
To be seen. Now, what does that do for you? Why do they want to be seen? Let's dig into that a little bit.
Blow their head up, their ego.
Their ego.
They don't have the right mindset. They don't have the spiritual mindset that they're supposed to have. And they want people to recognize them for what they do instead of being humble and doing it from their heart as a servant. They're doing it to be impressing other people.
Oh.
They say that they're higher than they really are.
Okay, so in other words, they're gonna get on this robe. Now, what is this robe? This is their garment. This is something that they wear. So they're gonna wear something to do what? To impress people.
To make them stand up.
Why though?
For the glory.
That's it.
They want that.
That's it.
Thank you. They want glory. But now, what did God say? God said, "My glory I will what?"
Give you not to another.
Who's another person that always wants to steal the glory of God?
The devil.
So you see the subtle but very distinct nature of Satan in that. I want that glory. I want people to look at me and go, wow. Be in awe. It don't seem like a lot, don't it? But it shows off that nature that comes from the devil. Pride. All of that comes from the enemy. All right, let's keep going. I told you Jesus was going to do what? I'm going to tell you how you really are. I'm going to show you who you are. And he's telling these religious leaders of his day. But I often refer to it as religious leaders of his day, but I will say that transcends even to today. And probably even until tomorrow, until Jesus comes.
But you have very few people today that are willing to confront religious leaders that ain't doing right. Very few. Because for the most part, they've got people's mind tricked into their way of doing stuff. And if you come at them and they know they're not right, that's why I said when God anointed me, I said there's a lot of preachers ain't going to like me. Because I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to tell it like it is. I had a brother that preached, and he preached against homosexuality, which the Bible speaks against. And the brother came in the back to change, and the pastor came in, he said, Elder, he said, you can come back here and preach anytime, but actually do me one favor. He said, what's that? He said, leave my faggots alone because they pay the tithes. He said, I'm going to preach what God tell me. He said, if you don't want me to come back, I won't come back. That happened to a very close friend of mine. So people don't want to hear they you know what I'm saying. They want to go along with the grain. The grain will send you to hell. Jesus came against the grain.
That's right. Now those are very important things that we have to make sure that we are keeping in mind. When you see the stealing of the things that God says belongs to me, which is always in the nature of Satan. Because Satan wanted to be who? He wants to be God. So that philosophy will always show itself in the beginning as very subtle things. Stealing the glory, utilizing the pride. You're walking in that path that's been laid by the enemy. Let's keep going though. We're not done with this. All right. So they want to be noticed by men, they border their phylacteries and lengthen the tassels. So in other words, they're doing all kinds of things to their garment that will make them stand out. All right. People do that today with the way they dress today. All right. You know, I mean, if we wanted to be identified as, you know, a so-called religious theologian, there's a certain outfit you can put on, isn't it? Certain people wear certain outfits, you know, I call it the choke collar, you know, with the thing. And you walk around and you can people say, oh, that must be, you know, a man of God or something. Well, just because you wear a certain dress or a certain piece of clothing doesn't make you what? A man of God. But a lot of people believe in that and they do that, and so and I could spend a long time. I could spend the rest of our session talking about that, but I'm not. But there's a lot to that as to why people like doing that. Let me just take 30 seconds and say, you can go to certain Eastern religious philosophies and even into some of the Catholic philosophies and look at all of the garb that they put on. And there's a lot to that. And in probably in another session as we go through this, especially when we get into the Old Testament, we're going to pick up on some of that and really kind of break it down. But there's a lot of reasons why people like to wear all that perfunctory and all that different circumstantial and pomp and circumstance that's involved in that. And all of that reflects and refers back to the nature that we will see when we read Ezekiel and Isaiah's description of how Satan looks. Satan looks beautiful. Isaiah and Ezekiel says that he had every jewel was a part of him.
Yes.
All right? He looked wonderful. And so that's a big thing to him. And so I'm going to stop there because otherwise I'll go further. You know, we'll pick up on that topic another time. But let's keep going with Jesus is pointing out. He's pointing out that they use that. They try to look wonderful and get the praise of people. And they love chief seats in the synagogue. So when they go, the synagogue is what? The place of what? Worship. So when they go to the place of worship, they want to sit where? In a special seat. Don't sit in my seat. This is that's for you know, elder so and so. That's for. All right, I can spend a long time there too, but I think y'all get the drift, right? Do we see that today? All right, so we definitely see that today. Now, let me just say this, folks. I'm not making this up. This is Jesus. He's describing this, but what's interesting is that we see it then, and we still see it today. And the places of honor at banquets. So you invite them to a banquet, they gotta sit at what?
The high chair.
They gotta give me the best chair. Give me the best chair. Alright?
I actually want this chair for one of my back from the surgery.
Oh, that's the high chair? Nobody else. Okay.
Anybody can sit there.
Okay. Yeah, we gotta move the light, put the light right over there.
Yeah.
There's a good comparison to that, the story about the wedding. When he said, when you're invited to a wedding, don't go and take the chief seat.
Exactly.
You know, someone comes to more worthy or honorable than you.
Exactly. All right. How much time we got? Okay, we are past time, but okay. So I might put this on the express a little bit, so y'all bear with me. No, please ask them. I don't mind them because it helps me. Because by no means am I talking like I know everything. I don't. So I need the help. We all do.
Amen.
All right. So let's look at this. It says, and they love respectful greetings. What does that mean?
Interesting.
They love respectful greetings in the marketplaces and to be called by men, Rabbi, Rabbi. So what? They love that
Recognition.
that attention and recognition and that assertion of authority by a phrase or a word. So, as for instance, if somebody gets their doctorate degree in physics, and you say, okay, well, he's a doctor of what? Of physics. Instantly, you now know he understands things like Isaac Newton's, laws that he's discovered. He understands some calculus. He understands quantum physics. You can all instantly say this person understands that just because you call them a doctor of physics. Well, and that's something that person may have earned through college, or, degrees and whatnot and so on. But in the religious realm, people like to be able to be called that just so you can esteem them as being what? High in the Lord, so to speak. Closer to God. And in Jesus' day they called him rabbi. today, in our day, what do we got? I mean, I've seen some people who had on their card, pastor, doctor, bishop, apostle, so-and-so.
Wow.
And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I'm like, really?
All of that.
Could you just put child of God? I mean, why would you want all of that? Because you enjoy people looking at you and go, oh, he's not just an apostle. He's a bishop apostle. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, he's a doctor bishop, pastor apostle. Come on. Really?
Goes on the Roman Catholic Church.
All right, and once again, I'm going to press on, but we could park there for a while and talk about that. We've all seen it. We've all experienced it.
You know what they're suffering from, right?
What's that?
SHS. Swollen head syndrome. It just came to me just now. It's really true.
Swollen head syndrome. I like that. All right. But now Jesus is talking about the scribes and Pharisees of what? Of his day? Man, did we see that today. All right? So this spirit has been around for what? For a while. And you should not call what? Rabbi. So he said, don't call people by these high titles. For one is your teacher and master, and that is who? Christ. You are all what? Brothers. So we are related in that we all have the blood of Christ. That makes us what? One. So we're equal. We stand together. We become a team.
You know, real quick, just to shoot this in, back in even in Jesus' time, after Jesus went back, and the man was begging by the synagogue, and he got down. They told him they wanted to bow down to the apostle. He said, "No, get up. I'm a man just like you. Get up." You know, and this is what people got to realize something. And I said this when I preached in Brooklyn. There's people that would not do stuff in front of the bishop, but they'll do it in front of the all-seeing eye. And you know, because and this is what people got to understand. Yes, you obey those who have rule and authority over you. And I was thinking back about Mother Barbara and my mother-in-law saying about the government. That's in Romans 13 chapter. About God put those people in those positions. He put them there, so we're supposed to obey them for whatever He reason He put them there. That's God's business.
Exactly.
But a lot of times there's people that esteem, and now I'm not saying you should disrespect the man of authority, woman of authority that God has placed in those positions, but bowing before them and giving them all these actual accolades that you wouldn't do for another lay member in the church, God is not pleased with.
I agree with that. All right. Let's continue here. So he says, and you may not call anyone father on earth, for one is your Father who is in heaven. All right. Now, once again, I could spend a whole lot of time on that, but I think you get the point. Right? You get the point, right? We need to just look at people and see them as believers in the Lord, right? Nor may you nor may you be called a leader, for one is your leader, and that is Jesus. Right? Because if you want to be a leader, you should do what? Serve. So these Pharisees and Sadducees didn't earn the right to be called leaders from the perspective of God. From God's perspective, God don't see you as a leader.
That's right.
God sees you as a taker. All right? As a user. All right? So you got to make sure that we understand that. If you want to be great, you should do what? Serve. I can't say that enough. Well, and here Jesus points it out. And the greater of you will be your what? Servant. Whosoever exalts himself will be what? Humble. All right? If you exalt yourself, you're going to be what?
Coming down.
All right? Because if you actually humbled yourself, you would be what? You would be exalted. God will put you where He could more greatly use you. And whosoever humbles himself will be exalted. Look what He says. Now He said all of this, and now He's going to hit it. Woe to you. See, when God says woe to you, that's a problem. It's a problem. So He says, woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites. Right? Leonard already talked about what that hypocrite means. Right? Saying one thing and what? Doing another. Because you shut up the kingdom of heaven before men. In other words, you're not really showing the light. Jesus came as the light of the world. These scribes and Pharisees are not showing forth the light. They're blocking it. And therefore they're not. They're basically closing the way or hiding the way to heaven. Because they're telling you the way to heaven is by self-esteem, by looking wonderful, having your robes a certain way, having your cars a certain way, flying around on all these jets, having all this big money in the bank account. That's how you know you're going to heaven. But that's not the truth, is it?
Not at all. Not at all.
All right. For you do not go in, nor do they permit those going to enter. So they become a what? Jesus calls them a what? A stumbling block in another passage of Scripture. Right? Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, because you are those who devour widows' houses. We talked about that. They look for people that they can just find ways to convince to just get what little you have. I want that too. I don't care how much little you got. If you got something, give it to me. They are once again are what? Takers.
Wolves and sheep.
Wolves and sheep clothing. What do wolves generally do with sheep?
Devour them.
Devour them. What's another word? Eat. Eat them. Just rip them apart and eat them. So when you are looking at people as sheep, I'm looking for you. If you're going to devour a widow's house, dude, you have no. You're best to be described as a wild animal, because that's what wild animals do. They look for. See, when the lion's out there and he's looking at the antelope, and he sees an antelope that maybe can't get along too well, it's hopping but ain't hopping as fast as the others. That's the next meal, isn't it? Because they don't care. The lion doesn't care about the fact that you struggling, that you ain't able to run like the rest of the people are running. I see you as being weak. I'm gonna devour you. That's an animal mind. Right? But that's the way the devil works. The devil has no sympathy for you because you may struggle. You will. You lost your husband. You lost your child. The devil has no sympathy. He still sends the what? The predators. And they come and devour.
Well, you know, Pastor Elder, when you see also in the church realm, when you find preachers or leaders that are doing this, they do know better.
Oh.
And they are really playing with fire because God is merciful that they will come to their senses and change. He's merciful like that. But there's coming a time where the book said, woe to the pastors that spread my flock.
That's right.
Because a lot of things that people that are in authority in churches have done have caused many people to not want to walk through a church door again. And a lady told me one day at the Department of Social Services, she said, you see that lady over there? You remember Coleman. I'll just say her last name because you don't leave it there. And the sister told me, she said she was in church yesterday. She just about broke the bench shouting in the spirit. Look how she cussing that lady out. She said, look at her cussing that lady out. I told her, I said, don't judge Jesus by the church people. Because the Bible said the church is like a net let down. You're going to get some of everything in there. But those that are of Christ, you're going to see the light coming through them. But that's all I want to say about that. Because they have a chance to change. Right. But some of them, they're into that filthy lucre. They want what they want for themselves. Not caring who they got to get it from.
That's true. That's true. And that person becomes a stumbling block. And then, like he said, they don't show the light. They become a way of blocking the light. And that's not good.
Especially if they profess Christ to
That's it.
someone else and then
And do otherwise. That's right.
Yep. That's exactly the truth. All right, let's keep going. These will receive greater damnation. Oh.
Because they know better.
Oh.
Because they know better.
Now, I didn't say that.
the church leader described it.
Okay. All right. So therefore, we can. I don't like seeing that, but we should pray for them.
Amen.
We should pray for them. But it's going to keep on. This is not me speaking. This is Jesus speaking. Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, because you go around the sea and the dry land to make one proselyte, and when it has happened, you make him a son of Gehenna twice as much as yourself. So you teach people these devilish ways. You teach people that, well, you don't want to have faith in God. You want to have faith of God, which I heard one person say. So that means you can just call things into being just like God does. You can call in wealth, and you can call in wealth and help and well-being. You just call it in like God does. And I looked at that and I'm like, okay, this was one of those so-called TV evangelists. And I go, that's a problem right there. Because you don't want to have the faith of God. You need faith in God.
That's right.
You got to have faith in God. Because God does this.
God really doesn't have faith.
God don't, okay, elaborate on that.
God does not have faith.
Go ahead.
He is an all-seeing eye.
Thank you.
Faith is the substance of things hoped for. Why is he hoping for what he already knows is going to happen?
That's right.
Evidence of things not seen. He knows it all.
See, and when a person makes that statement,
They don't realize how foolish they are.
they belittle God as though God needs tools.
Imagine.
God needs a tool, and so you can use the same tool that God uses. Yeah, and if I call that person's name, everyone in here would know who he was.
Leave it. Leave it.
Can we look at some of the elements of the word woe?
Well, I mean,
Woe is indeed a bad word.
yes, it is. Go ahead, you give us that.
Okay. My dictionary is telling me that woe is adversity, anguish, calamity, depression, difficulty, disease, distress, grief and hardship, illness and infirmities,
All that's
misery
controlled.
and misfortune, pain, a plight, a scourge. Woe is sickness, sorrow, suffering, and torment. Woe are trials and tribulations and troubles. And you can go on and on and on from there. That's all of the woe that's coming if you don't.
Which is a good coming back to what I'm saying. This is the way God is trying to let them know. Jesus is trying to let them woe to you. If they change, there won't be the woe.
Right.
Because he gives all of us a chance to change.
Yes, he does.
But you keep on the way you're going, thinking you're running up against me. You're not running up against me. You're setting your own self up for failure. It's just a matter of my timing of your release of your failure.
That's right.
And all these things are
Yeah.
what will happen to you if you don't change.
Yeah.
All this is coming.
All right. Continue on. We're gonna almost there. We're almost there. Woe to you, blind guides. All right. So what she just said, all of that, and then he calls them what? Blind guides. Why? And why are they blind? Because they choose not to walk in the what?
Light.
In the light. I don't want Jesus, and I don't want what Jesus is saying. I choose to walk in the way I want to walk. Therefore, you choose to walk in darkness. Blind. For which is great, the gold or the sanctuary? I skipped something. Let me go back up. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whosoever will swear by the sanctuary, it is nothing, but who may swear by the gold, that's the wealth, of the sanctuary is a debtor. Look what Jesus says. Fools. A fool is one that does the what? Says they're what?
There is no
There is no God. So they're acting as though there what? Is no God. Fools and blind ones. For which is greater? The gold, that's the what? The wealth of this world, which is greater. Or the sanctuary, a place in which the Spirit of God dwells. Which is greater? The sanctuary is greater. But you see a lot of teaching today that they tell you, no, the gold is greater. But it's not. So he says, fools, blind ones, which is greater, the gold or the sanctuary that sanctifies the gold? All right, so we know the answer to that. For whosoever will swear by the altar is nothing, but whosoever may swear by the gifts that is on it is a debtor, which is not true. All right. So he says again, fools and blind ones, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that is sanctified by the gift, that is sanctifying the gift, I should say. He therefore who swears by the altar swears by it and all things on it. All right? So the altar is way more important than the gift. See, the altar represents where you would go to commune and to be in the presence of God. That is more important than anything that you can so-called get from this world.
Amen.
Being in the presence of God is more valuable than anything.
Amen.
I don't care what you but see, our world today doesn't believe that. All right. I'm way past my time. Can I just take a few more minutes here?
Absolutely.
I apologize. All right. And he says, woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, because you give a tithe of mint and dill, and of coming. Boy, we could spend some time on that. And neglect the weightier things of the law. More focus on the what? The tithe rather than the what? The weightier things. Which is what?
Salvation and the cleansing of your life.
All right.
Put yourself on the right track with God.
Exactly. And Jesus points it out. He says, judgments and kindness and faith. It is necessary to do these things and not to neglect the other. Blind guides. He's calling them blind again. They're not walking in the light. Who are straining at a gnat and swallow a camel. All right? So, here's these individuals that they're trying to look so wonderful because, you know, according to the Mosaic law, you're not supposed to eat an animal with the what? With the blood. And so, if they're walking down the street, and all of a sudden a gnat flies down their throat amongst the company, all of a sudden they're going to be so sanctimonious now. Because a gnat just fell, and we didn't have a chance to straighten the gnat, and they purged themselves. They stick their finger in their throat, and see how holy I am? I'm so holy I won't even swallow a gnat. Because I know it hasn't been purged by the Mosaic law. But then you go home and eat some camel meat, which once again was against the what? During that time it was against the Mosaic law to eat. So Jesus is pointing out, he's showing the hypocrisy. In front of people, you got to put this big performance on. But then when you go home, you slicing up some camel chops. Alright? So he says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you make clean the outer cup of the plate, and within you are full of greed and self-indulgence. Greed? Do we have greed in the church today?
Yes, you do.
Self-indulgence?
Yes, you do.
Blind Pharisees. First clean first the inner side of the cup and the plate, and the outer of them might also become clean. Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, because you are like whitewashed tombs. Whitewashed tombs. They look clean, but what's inside of those things? Dead man's what? Bones. Which outwardly indeed appear beautiful, within are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. During the Mosaic law, you were not supposed to touch a dead carcass. You would become ceremonially what? Unclean.
Unclean.
All right. So also indeed outwardly you appear to men to be what? Righteousness. So outwardly they have all the right things, like you just said. Person they go to so-called church or these different places of worship, and everybody looks wonderful. They dress wonderful. They smell good. They're talking good. But then you catch them when they just hanging out at work or with their buddies, and they're what? Totally different. All right. All right. Where did I leave off?
29, 23, 29.
Woe to you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the tombs of the righteous. And you say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them of the blood of the prophets. So they're saying, we know our fathers killed the prophets, but if we had been back there, we wouldn't have killed them. But they just did two things. Number one, you identify, you know that your fathers killed the prophets. So you're guilty of that. But then he goes on and says, so that you testify to yourself that you are sons of those who murdered the prophets. You identify with that. So that puts your guilt on you. And that's another thing that we're going to talk about once we get to the crucifixion of Christ. When they say, let his blood be on us and our what? And our children. I won't spend no time on that yet because I'm trying to rush. Excuse me for rushing. And you will fill up the measure of your father. And now Jesus called them blind. He called them fools. He called them hypocrites. Now he calls them what? Serpents. Serpents. Brood of vipers. All right. How will you escape from the judgment of Gehenna? Gehenna is everlasting torment. Because of this, behold, I sent you prophets and wise men and scribes. So I sent you prophets that will tell you of the things of God, things to come. I sent you wise men that will help you interpret it. I sent you scribes that will help you articulate it, to write it down, so we can read what we're reading today. And of them you will kill. All right?
And crucified.
They killed how many prophets? Many prophets. And crucified. Right? They crucified Jesus.
Just like their fathers did.
Just like the fathers did, exactly. And of them you will scourge in your synagogues. So you're going to scourge these righteous people in the place of God's, the place that is set aside for prayer to God. God said, the temple is supposed to be called the house of what? Prayer. But you scourging and persecuting people. There are a lot of people that sit inside these churches today, and all they do is backbite one another. They fight against one another instead of us learning what we need to learn to walk with God. Only one person has that right to do what we're doing now, and that's who? That's Jesus. See, Jesus can call these individuals what he's calling them. You know why? Because Jesus is perfect in his analysis. My analysis is warped by my own thinking. I have an opinion, and my opinions can be correct in certain ways and wrong in others. I acknowledge that because that makes me what?
Human.
I'm a human being. But God don't make mistakes.
Amen. Right.
All right. Let's finish up. That you will be all the righteous blood being poured out on the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zacharias. So in other words, he's saying you guys are guilty of all of this. If you decide to walk the way that you're walking, you will have the weight of all judgment upon you. Not just what you do, but the fact that sin produces eternal separation from God if you choose to walk in it and to live in it. If you don't acknowledge and put on the righteousness of Christ, you then have to walk in what kind of righteousness? Your own righteousness. Does anybody have enough righteousness to stand in the presence of God? What did Isaiah say? Woe was me when he stood into the heavens and he saw the likeness of the Almighty. Not that he saw him directly, but just being in that presence. He said, "Woe is me! I'm a man of what? Unclean lips." He instantly recognized, no matter how good you may think you are, you stand before the Lord, your righteousness is in no way comparable. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. This is Jesus speaking. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I would have gathered your children as a hen gathers. So what Jesus is saying is, you guys had the word of the prophets and you had the writings of Moses. If you paid attention to them, you would have been accepting me properly. But because you didn't, you don't understand the time. You don't even recognize that I am the promised one that was to come. And therefore you're rejecting me. Because you don't understand the time that is here before you. Because you rejected the prophets. The prophets were talking about me. Everything of the Old Testament is talking about Jesus. Every festival, every holiday, every act, every patriarch in some way identified a nature or a way or a process by which Jesus was coming to redeem man. And if you don't catch it, then you're just going through it for nothing. And so he said, you missed it. So he says, woe unto you because you have not done it. And I would have gathered you like a hen would gather the children. Would gather her young under her wings. And you did not want it. Behold, your house is left to you desolate. But I say to you, you will not see me from now on until whenever you say, blessed is he who cometh in the name of the Lord. All right. We're gonna stop there, but we want to ask: does anyone have any